Hello, my name's Mr. Mayhew. I'm the Head of History at Ormiston Victory Academy. I just want to talk to you about some of the things that you can do at home to help your children prepare better for their GCSE history and their mock exam that they'll be completing this year. In terms of the specification we complete, as you can see on the screen, we complete the Edexcel GCSE history with the code there. And the focus for their mock exam will be the American West. And there are three key topics in this. There's the early settlement of the West between roughly 1835 and 1862, so talking about things like the Oregon Trail, the crossing of the plains, the establishment of more and more settlement in the West. You then talk about development of the plains, the creation of the Transcontinental Railroad. You start to see the Homestead Act, its impact there, and then later on conflicts and conquest, the conflict that rises on the plains between the Native American tribes and the US government, as well as conflicts in the towns amongst settlers themselves. So, what are the sorts of things that you can do to better prepare yourselves for these exams? First of all, what I'd say is make sure that you join our Google Classroom, which is for the whole of Year 10. Please ensure you join this, and the join code is there. The reason we're asking you to join is because we're going to be putting on there a whole variety of resources that will help you in preparing for these exams. The more revision you do, and I would suggest little and often, the better you'll get at this. So please join there. And on the Google Classroom, or rather I should say in the Google Classroom, we will be putting links to things like Seneca Learning. Now, Seneca Learning, many of you will have used before in other departments, but we'd really like you to try and use this as a revision tool in history. It's an excellent resource that's free, which is always really important, and it allows pupils to revise and immediately test themselves, which means that you can see instantly if things are sticking, if knowledge is there, or if there are big gaps in your knowledge. Now, what I'm going to be trying to do is we'll aim to set a revision topic every couple of weeks. This isn't compulsory, but it will be useful to see who is really pushing themselves. So again, the join code is there, but similarly, I've put a link to this in the Google Classroom, so you can click on that and join there. And the first assignment I put in there is looking at the life of the Plains Indians, the Native American tribes who lived on the plains. So what are some general key tips for GCSE history revision? What I'd say is, first of all, many of you will use flashcards already, creating simple questions with the answer on the other side. In terms of in history, what I'd say you could use them for keywords, and remember, subject-specific vocabulary is very important. You've got to make sure that you are using those terms that we use in the textbooks. So, for instance, making sure you know what the Homestead Act is, for instance, the Fort Laramie Treaty, which one? Make sure you know. You could use it about causation. What does one event cause? So you could put the name of an event on one side, and on the back of it, put the consequences, what happens as a result. You could do judgment, an agree or disagree card, okay, with a quote, and then you can put whether this is true, false, agree or disagree. And you can use them also to create a narrative of events. So you could do your cards to create a timeline. You can also use them for retrieval practice. You can also use, you can use your cards for this, but you can also generally use retrieval practice, which is using things like Memorize and Quizlet. Now, there are things out there, but I'd suggest that you create your own as well. And how to use it in history, we've got to try and do spacing of knowledge. Don't just revise something and then leave it done. Revise something, a topic, then come back to it a few days later. How much can you remember? And then do it a few days later. Repetition like this helps to embed this knowledge in your memories. The knowledge organisers that we've provided for you are a very good base of knowledge. They are just that, though, a base, but they will help you in your explanation and analysis in your writing. Think about factors, causes and consequence. Try to identify 2 or 3 factors related to an event. Try and think of the causes of an event. Try and think of, for instance, it's got there an example if you were looking at the Normans, which we don't obviously, but you can think about these as examples. Or you could have a task. Give 2 examples of ... then look at our specification and come up with ideas. Now, graphic organisers can be used very, very well. And there's some good examples here. A Venn diagram is useful in comparing and looking for similarities and differences. You could look at a chain of events. So, for instance, if you're thinking about the narrative question, that chain of event diagram you can see there is very, very good. A spider diagram you can see there is very good for thinking about all the facts about a different area. And you've got those sequential thinking models you can see at the top right, which are very good for thinking about things that happen and the consequences of these. So in history, as it says, you've got causation, where you create a visual flow diagram. You could create a Venn diagram for changing, and you could then think of concept mapping. And the last sorts of areas I want to talk about here are dual coding. Now, dual coding is where we do the writing, but we also draw little pictures which help embed this knowledge a little bit more, because you're thinking about it in two different ways. Little doodles can be a really nice way to do this. And again, things like comic strips, things like if you do a mind map, do little pictures to add on what you think. So if you've got any questions, feel free to email me. My email's on the screen there. Hopefully that's been useful. And all I would say is regular short bursts of revision are much better than one day of solid revision. Thank you.